So today is July 27th, 2025. We're in beautiful West Allis, Wisconsin at the RV park that we stay for typically very, very long stays to visit family. And that's the subject of today's video. What happens to your RV when you stay in one spot for a long time? So today we're going to talk about the tag axle suspension and dump control mechanism on your diesel pusher. We're going to talk about the auto dump mode. We're going to talk about the disable position of that switch as well as the manual switch. And we're going to teach you something that we didn't know when we tried to pull out of here last year and we left 40-foot skid marks because our rear tag axle was frozen in position. Come along with Sue and I and we'll show you how we solved that problem and how we're not going to have it this year. Come on, Sue, let's get going. So this is the exact dash cam footage from May 1st, 2023, the day Sue and I arrived at the Wisconsin State Fair RV park in our hometown of Milwaukee. It had been raining steady for a few hours as we traveled, and over the years, plenty of issues have surfaced while driving in rain. My last video about our issues with rain was episode 229, about 3 years ago, where we talked about rear drive axle wheel well water intrusion and the ineffective, underpowered 36-inch long windshield wipers on our 2014 Newmar Dutch Star. If you own an older Newmar motorhome and haven't seen this episode, I suggest you take a look. We shared how we solved the issues we had, but only you can decide if that will work for you. I will say that the 36-inch blades that we downsized to 32 inches in that video have since been downsized one more time to Wiper Technologies WT6-28-inch blades as of October 2024. This rainy day drive footage shows the innocent mistake we made when we parked the motorhome after traveling in the rain for hours. We did not know to make certain the auto tag dump switch was not left in that position after parking with the brakes and drums soaking wet. We had to learn the hard way to leave the motorhome tag axle mode switch positioned in the disabled mode so that the next time you started your RV, which could be weeks or months later, that the best correct suspension configuration will be requested by the motorhome controls. You want the front and drive airbags to inflate like always, as well as the tag axle airbags. This will ensure enough weight will be on the tag axle wheels to grip the road enough to turn them when you move. Remember, you can always deflate the tag bags to make tight turns out of a parking space or RV park roadway after you are certain that they will break free and actually turn. If you start the rig in the auto dump mode, the tag axle bags won't inflate until you go over 8 miles an hour in drive. Let's drop in on Sue and see how the actual moment was right after I dragged our motorhome tag tires 40 feet.
We are getting ready to just move over at State Fair. We're going to get a little bit closer to the post so we have more space to park our car on the other side. And unfortunately, as we're pulling out, I saw this black line. I'm like, what the heck? And noticed that this tire, the back tire, was not moving. Roger that. Something's clicking. It's turning, but it had a click. All right, it's turning. It's still turning. Boy, that was weird. What was that about? Go ahead.
Check the mud flap now.
Roger that. All right, keep going.
How should I be straightening so that my mud flap is parallel to the concrete?
Turn to the driver's side. Swing your...
Anyone that drives a diesel pusher motorhome needs to study up on all of the various issues that the vanity mud flap can cause if not adjusted correctly and if you choose to ignore it. It can be positioned too low and will sweep up more rocks and stones from the roadway onto your tow vehicle than it actually deflects and prevents from hitting it. This is especially important to address before you go to Alaska. It can snag road debris like steel-belted treads thrown off from a truck tire. These can get grabbed by the rotating engine belts and radiator machinery. This would be a bad day for you. Or during your auto leveling process, if you park the mud flap over a sidewalk or concrete curb, you will simply set the motorhome down on top of it and punch the steel mud flap into your selective catalyst reduction filter. Check out our episode number 177 when that almost happened to us. It was just one of those days.
And this was the goal, to get as close to the pole and yet give us some slide room. Mission accomplished. So before we go inside and I sit in the driver's cockpit fooling around with the switches and tell you about the functionality of the dump control, I thought I'd come out here and try to do a little bit of theatrics to help you understand it. So this is the tag axle, and there's two tires. One on this side, one on the other side. And this is the drive axle. There's 4 tires here, 2 on this side and 2 on the other side. And when we're talking about dropping the tag airbag pressure, we're talking about just the pressure that's supporting this axle. When you're driving and fooling around and maneuvering and pressing this button control that's either on your dashboard or on your side console, or maybe even in your dashboard with fancy controls on the steering wheel, we're not talking about deflating any bags for here or the front axle, just the tag. Now, when you effectively take the air pressure off the bags in the tag axle, what you're doing is you're making this tag axle support less and less weight and basically making it less and less useful to the coach. You can get to the point where the bags are so loosey-goosey with the connection between this axle and your motorhome, it essentially is just holding its own weight, nothing else. So you can see that if you have both sets of bags energized, you can carry the most amount of weight, but what that's done from a turning point standpoint, that's walked the turning pivot point during all of your steering back somewhere, certainly back behind the rear drive wheels, and has walked it over more towards where the tag is. Increased wheelbase means increased turning radius, and if your turning radius is here, these tires are skidding when you're turning. So you can see real quick the utility in basically being able to sort of get rid of this axle so that you can turn around this pivot point here. And that's going to be the crux of the whole thing that we're going to be talking about when we go inside and we talk about using the tag axle control by doing different things.
And remember, the modes are auto mode, manual mode, or disable mode. Auto mode is when you're going forward and the tag axle and the drive axle and all the bags are energized. And when you're going forward, most of the time, because you have just backed into a spot, most of the time, up until 8 miles an hour, you're not going to have pressure on this axle. You're going to have pressure only on this axle in the front, and your turning radius is going to be the easiest and the smallest, so you can get out of the campground, get on the road. You go over 8 miles an hour, this axle will repressurize, and now you have maximum load carrying capacity spread across all of your tires. That's when you're in the automatic mode. You get to your campground, you drive into the campground, and now you find out where you're going to be, and oh, it's a back-end spot. Because your switch is in auto, you will back into your spot. The bags will de-energize here so that this axle will soften up. You'll have an easier turning radius going backwards. You'll have less skidding between these tires, and you'll basically be pivoting at or near where this axle is. If you had been driving with the disable mode on your way here, these bags would, of course, be always energized when you're driving down the road. That's a Department of Transportation requirement. You have to have all your tires supporting the load so that you don't wear out the roads. You would always have your bags inflated. Even if you drove into the campground and you put it in reverse and you drive back into your spot, this would still be energized, and this, you'd have maximum turning radius. It would be a little bit more tougher to get in, and you'd have the skidding going on here. If you were in the disabled mode and you showed up at your campground and now you were smart enough to remember, hey, I'm going to back into my spot here now at the campground, you would be able to go in the manual mode and press it. Because it's a momentary contact switch, you'd be able to press that button for, let's say, 5 or 10 seconds. It would start on its way, this thing losing its compression to take load, and it would shift the turning point back more forward to a shorter wheelbase, and you would be able to back into your spot more effectively. The beauty of using the manual mode is that the minute you take your finger off of it, it will revert back to the disabled mode if your switch is in the middle, and your bags will fill back up. The beauty of that is that you will never forget that this bag isn't inflated when it comes time to leave. That's the problem with using the automatic mode. When you come to a campground and your tag inflation deflation switch is in the auto mode, you will ceremoniously put it into reverse. This bag will start deflating. You'll get into your spot, and then many months later you probably will forget, like we did, that our switch was in the auto mode, and this bag will not reinflate until I drive out of here. I drive out of the campground and I get above 8 miles an hour, and then because of the DOT regulations, this will have to inflate so that it takes all of the load. And that's the problem that Sue and I had, was that because there wasn't much weight on these wheels, there wasn't enough friction there to turn it hard enough to break loose the rusted in place brake drum that we had, and it left those 40-foot skid marks. So now that we were outside and I explained a little bit about the physicality of where these bags are and the distance between the drive axle and the tag axle and the whole point of what we're doing, let's go through what it's like when you're sitting here, what you're thinking, how you operate the tag switch, which is tag dump auto is in the forward position, which is probably how you want to drive 99.9% of the time. But then the disable position is when you're in the center here, And I'll talk about what these positions mean. And then there's the manual dump position, which is a momentary contact. Now, if I was really an awesome YouTuber, I'd have the engine running and you'd hear all sorts of stuff going off back there when the air is exhausting and everything, but I'm too lazy to start the engine up. In fact, I want to show you one other thing before we get going here. You go, Mark, what the heck is that yellow band on your steering wheel? Well, you'll notice it says TV satellite antenna. And right now, where we're sitting is one of the few times that I have our crank up in the ceiling cranked up, and then our antenna is up. And you don't want to drive down the road when your antenna is up, and when you use it infrequently, that's going to get missed. So we have these snap things, and we have a whole pile of them depending upon what's the oddity at this particular time. But if whatever this blue one was one of the odd things, and this is a door, vent, or window, if there's something peculiar about a door, a vent, or window, I would put that on my steering wheel. And when it's time to leave, I go, what the heck? Great reminders. They're in our Amazon store if you'd be interested in these as well. Let's get back to the tag switch. I said that 99% of the time you're going to want this thing, the tag dump, you want it in the auto position. And that's so that once you have driven out of your campground and you've went over 8 miles an hour since you had parked it last, and I'm assuming you were in auto when you parked it, and you more than likely backed into a spot, your tag has dumped its air and you will not have tag support. You will not be pushing on your tags with anything more than the dead weight of the tag assembly. That's how auto mode works. And when you start your rig up and you drive out of the campground, not until you're over 8 miles an hour will your tag bags fill back up, and you'll be in the normal mode of carrying the maximum capacity and spreading it across the maximum amount of tires. So now you're driving, your whole entire trip is done. You pull into your campground and you see that you have a back-in spot. Because you're in auto, you don't have to think of anything. You put your control in reverse, and when you start to back into your spot, your tag will dump and it'll allow you to have tighter turning radius backing up and less wheel scrub. Now here's where Sue and I got ourselves in trouble. Because I had normally 99% of the time driven in auto, and I forgot that I was going to be here for a long time. I shouldn't even say forgot. I hadn't learned yet that when you stay a long time in a spot, you could potentially rust your brake drums or your brake discs in position. And that is in fact what happened to us. And because my switch was still in auto and my bags would not inflate until I left and went over 8 miles an hour, I didn't have enough downforce to hold those tires against the asphalt to be able to break them free. And you probably saw in the video lead up here to the point we are right now in this video that when I finally did jerk back and forth a couple of times and I finally broke that drum free, you could see that there was a click and a jerk, and from that point I was free. But I had damaged that tire somewhat because I had skid for 40 feet, and I remember vividly feeling that tire, that I had a flat spot on there. Now I have since replaced those tires, not because of that incident. One more year came around. I got about 5.5 years on the tires, and I ditched them because we're going on a adventure caravan trip out west, and I certainly don't want to have bogus tires when I'm driving through the mountains. So the thing that we're going to do now when we leave here, I'm going to make certain when I start the engine up this time around to leave, I'm going to make sure that I'm not in the tag dump auto mode. I'm going to be in the center disable mode. and I'm not going to be in the manual momentary contact mode. Remember, even though I'm pressing this, nothing's happening because I don't have my ignition on right now. So when I start the engine, I'm going to be in the disable or center mode of my three-way rocker. Your RV might be different. This switch could in fact be on the dashboard on an older unit. Remember, ours is a 2014 Newmar Dutch Star, and the new ones actually have it on the dashboard where the steering wheel is fancier and it's got stalk controls and you can do all sorts of things. By us being in the disabled mode, the minute I start my rig up, all of the bags will inflate. And when it's time to leave and for me to go straight, I'm expecting to be able to hit drive, and the minute I start to go forward, I'm expecting to have enough down pressure on that tag axle that it will break itself free. I'm also going to be much more conscious of watching and feeling, waiting for that to break free, and plus Sue will be out there with the radio. If it doesn't, then at that time I would immediately go to neutral, and then I'd go to reverse, and I'd ever so gingerly go in reverse or forward. But I'm expecting, my problem was that I was on asphalt with gravel, a little bit of gravel on it, and no pressure on the tire. A person could choose to always operate in the disable mode, where every time you start it, you inflate all the bags and you don't ever have the advantage of the better turning radius and not scrubbing the tires. If you go on IRV2 and pose the question how damaging that might be to your tires, you could see that the tires will scrub more when you have your tag dump disabled, but it's not bad enough that you normally have to worry about it all that much. Remember, the newer rigs right now have tags that steer, and this whole discussion here isn't near as critical on the newer rigs right now. The other reason you might want to use the disable would be if you're backing up into something that is slightly inclined and you don't want to plow the back of your RV into the dirt or the concrete or an apron. By virtue of having the tag axle energized with the airbags, you basically will have a higher profile back there when you're backing into something, and you will have less a tendency to dive the back of your RV into an incline that's going up back there. So that's the other reason you would want to use the disabled function. Last thing now is, why do they have the manual function? If somebody always prefers to drive with the disable function energized, where all the bags are always energized, and let's say you pull into a campground and you see that there's a lot of tight turns coming up, and you're going forward, this is a momentary contact, this button, and if you press it for, let's say, 5 or 10 seconds, it will exhaust the bag enough that then you can take your finger off this button and you can use both hands in doing your tight turning in the RV park. And if you have continued tight turns up, you're going to have to plan on probably hitting this again for 10 seconds or so to exhaust that bag, or the majority of the pressure in that bag, until you need both hands again and you're going to start turning. That is not a latching button, it's momentary. So when you're going forward and you want better turning radius and you want less scrubbing, that's when you use the manual. The other time you might choose to use the manual is if you're ready to leave, and let's say you were at a harvest host or you were at a rally and you're in grass and you're looking around and you're going, you know, things seem to have gotten softer since I've been here. You might want to go ahead and hit the manual mode and dump the load on your tag wheels, so it's effectively not carrying anything other than the dead weight of the tag and the tires. And then start out with your drive wheels having maximum traction and maximum success possibility to get out from where you are. I want to caution you to not think that that is going to be too successful of a function. Typically when you're on grass, it's a gray area already. So that wraps up today's video. As you can see, I'm already working on editing it, and I just needed an outro. So here we are. I'd like to invite you to subscribe if you enjoyed what we're doing. There's a fair amount of work involved in this to try to do it correctly when I'm trying to help somebody or teach somebody. We in fact are going to a party today, so don't invite us if you don't want us to bring our cameras. We're going to be talking to Brian and Linda today, and they are our expert RV friends that have changed their rig literally every 2 years since we've started RVing. So it should be an interesting night tonight. So until we get to meet you on the road or in a campground someday, we invite you to join us most Sunday mornings for another episode of our journey in Myles.